Dear students, welcome to session 39 of second BA optional English prescribed by the Mangalore University. This is Sumana Rajendra, Associate Professor, Department of English, Purna Prashna College, Udupi. Today, I am going to deal with the topic themes in the novel The Pickwick Papers. Session 39 is the third part of this topic called themes in the novel. Let us go on. First of all, let us deal with the theme of crime as portrayed by Dickens in the novel. Dickens was greatly concerned about crimes in society. Though this novel does not fall into the category of dark themes of Dickens, like most of his novels, it is basically a comedy. Crime that is portrayed in the novel is of a lighter kind. The example of crime that is portrayed in the novel is Jingle's elopement with Rachel, Mr. Pickwick's so-called breach of promise case, which is slapped on him by a lady called Mrs. Borden. And then we have the affairs of some of the married women characters in the novel. Next, we discuss the theme of social class. Mrs. Borden, the lady who slapped the case on Mr. Pickwick when she mistakes his speech to be a marriage proposal. She is overwhelmed to think that Mr. Pickwick has proposed to her. Her real intention in wanting to marry Mr. Pickwick is her desire to raise her social status. Then there is this Alfred Jingle, the villainous character who wishes to rise in social status by marrying a rich girl. Sam Weller, a boot cleaner who is engaged as a servant by Mr. Pickwick, later is elevated to the class of a valet to Mr. Pickwick, and at the end of the novel, he becomes Mr. Pickwick's closest friend. The use of contrast in the themes. Dickens has used the technique of contrast in handling these various themes in the novel. First of all, the novel is a serious novel which is presented in the form of a comedy. Comfortable things like the joy of adventurous travel, the pleasures of eating and drinking is contrasted with the filth of Fleet prison. Then there is a contrast between the relationship between men and evil wives. Innocence and youthfulness are put against crime and prison. Romance is contrasted with marriage of greed. We next shift to the theme of injustice and punishment. Dickens was greatly affected by the fact that his father was imprisoned for not being able to pay his bakery debts. Dickens projects a system that makes people trapped and end up suffering. Mr. Samuel Pickwick is falsely implicated in a case by a widow. It is both hilarious and serious. On one hand, there is a very comical scene where she falls over Mr. Pickwick, flinging her arms round his neck, thinking that he has proposed to her. But then she becomes very aggressive when she comes to know that he had absolutely no intention of proposing to her. Good characters in the novel are not able to escape from poverty and the debtor's prison. The theme of imprisonment is another theme used in the novel. Prison scenes had an impact on Dickens right from his early age. The horrifying conditions in the Fleet prison are brought out in the novel. Mr. Pickwick is imprisoned on the grounds of breach of promise. Men go to prison connected with crime but come out wiser and better persons. Now, this is another phase of prison life as presented in the novel. Dickens had cleanly observed the changes in convicts as they come out of prison, and this he portrays in the novel by making Mr. Pickwick as instrumental in changing the lives of Jingle and Job Trot. Corruption in prison is shown when Mr. Pickwick bribes the prison guards. The theme of poverty. The theme of poverty is another recurrent theme which has appeared in most of Dickens's novels. Many characters in the novel live in poverty. Most of these characters are met by Mr. Pickwick in the debtor's prison. Many people turn to crime to avoid poverty. Example, the character of Jingle, who commits crimes like attracting rich girls to marry him so that he can pay off his debts. This is because he is basically poor. Therefore, he wishes to acquire wealth through marriage. Mr. Pickwick and Sam Weller observe poverty and wish to help the poor. Theme of marriage and love. This novel focuses on love and marriage in society. Some characters in the novel wish to marry to be financially stable. Example, that of Mrs. Borden and Jingle. Jingle chases several women and elopes with Rachel for her money. Mr. Weller's second wife married him for his ancestral property. Mrs. Bordell mistakes Mr. Pickwick to have proposed to her and is overjoyed. Theme of the suffering of the poor. Almost every novel of Dickens projects the suffering of the poor. In this novel, we find many stories of good people who could not escape from poverty in the debtor's prison. A cobbler had inherited money but ended up spending a lot of money in legal fees and lands in debt. Some inhabitants of the debtor's prison are living in poverty, but they don't care. They have no other choice but to languish in those prisons. Theme of law and politics. There is a brief appearance of politicians in the novel. We have a mention of an absurd kind of an election in Eatanswill. There is a big role for lawyers in the novel, though. Mr. Perker is a character who is portrayed as a smart lawyer of Mr. Pickwick. Dodson and Fogg represent the unethical image of law. These two are the objects of Dickens's satire against the legal system. Dickens always had a kind of hatred towards the legal system, and he did not miss out any chance to satirize the system. And he does it yet again in this novel. Mercenary effects of law are clearly depicted in the novel as Dickens had worked as a clerk in a legal office at a young age. And this experience of his, he used it in portraying the theme of law and politics. The lawyers and the politicians don't do anything about the horrors of the debtor's prison in the novel. We now come to the questions related to the session. Dickens was greatly concerned about a few things. One of them is love, marriage, crime. It is crime. If he was concerned about anything, the most it was crime. And he took every chance to portray crime in his novels. Now, there is a case of a widow's misconception that Mr. Pickwick proposed to her, and it is a character called Mr. Borden. So she is overjoyed when she believes that Mr. Pickwick has proposed to her, and she thinks that by marrying Pickwick, she can live a comfortable life thereafter. The Pickwick Papers is a serious novel presented in the form of whether it's a tragedy, tragic comedy, or none of the above. The answer is comedy. It is indeed a serious novel, dealing with crime, suffering of the poor, failure of marriages, elopement, etc., but presented in the form of a comedy. Now we have a character who is portrayed as a smart lawyer of Mr. Pickwick, whether it is Sam Weller, Mr. Parker, Jingle, or none of the above. And the answer is Mr. Parker. Yes, he is an important character in the novel who is the lawyer of Mr. Pickwick and fights his case and comes out victorious. You have somebody in the novel who has inherited money but spent a lot of money in legal fees, whether it's a baker, it's a cobbler, it's a jailer, or none of the above. Well, the answer is cobbler. It's very sad that though this person had inherited money, he had to spend all his money fighting his case. I come to an end to this session. Thank you very much.